few years ago, someone asked me to share the names of the people that I had discipled. After a few minutes of uncomfortable silence, I stated that while I could list the names of lots of people I had engaged with in small groups, in Sunday school classes, in Sunday worship and the like, I couldn't honestly say that I had discipled anyone. It's interesting that Jesus spent most of his time with 12 people. And as a pastor, I began to wonder, why don't I allocate my time in a similar way? The honest answer, it wasn't in my job description. A lot more could be said, but let's just say that the expectations for growing the church are often greater than the expectation for making disciples. In January of 2012, I remember the date because I was preparing for a sabbatical that coming summer, and I was at a workshop in Denver. I was invited by my friend Dave. Remember Dave? I shared his name earlier in one of our other stories, and he and I have been journeying together for a number of years. Anyway, it had been a particularly discouraging season of ministry for me, and Dave invited me to this workshop because he sensed it would bring some encouragement and some vocabulary and tools that would help me in my role as a pastor. Now, to be honest, I don't remember much from that workshop, perhaps because I was a bit numb, maybe burnt out. But I do remember one thing that I heard loud and clear. Mike Breen shared this phrase: when you build the church, sometimes you get disciples. And when you make disciples, you always get the church. God got my attention that day. God was speaking. God was speaking to me. It was one of those the Grinch who stole Christmas kinds of moments where I felt my heart, which had shriveled, I think, a lot in the last several years of ministry, grew 3 sizes that day. I realized in that moment that I had lost focus, that I was working hard. I was putting in a lot of time and effort into building the church. And honestly, I was working hard to help the church survive. 8 years later, I could look back and recognize that a lot had changed. 8 years later, I returned from my second sabbatical to hear the reports from the church board and from disciples who had been equipped, empowered, and deployed to lead as the priesthood of all believers in our local church context. They were sharing story after story after story of the journey from survive to thrive. I was overwhelmed. I was celebrating and giving praise to God because things were different. Because I was different, and most importantly, because we were different. It was obvious the church was different because we were engaged, and we were living out the core practices of following Jesus.